All right, thank you. Although hey, this is Ian, I'm the chair of the Indiana Planning Commission. I'm just looking at all the people that are attending, and okay, there, I saw there was a name that I saw earlier and it got moved. So great. Well, this is the January 13th, 2021 meeting of the City of Edina Planning Commission. Thanks everyone for joining us. It's our first meeting of the new year. I hope everyone has a good year this year. We're looking forward to having some good planning commission meetings and help Edina. On tonight's meeting, as we've had for several months now, we're conducting it remotely via Zoom type technology, using a WebEx actually as a technology. Everyone can see and hear each other. We're going to be remote for at least, a midterm future probably, but continuing to meet remotely to comply with health and safety protocols. Tonight's meeting, we have 2 public hearings and 2 what are called sketch plan reviews, reports and recommendations. The public hearings allow for public comment via telephone. We'll give the phone number, the call-in number at the time when those public hearings occur. Sketch plan reviews do not have public hearing. Those are just for developers to give us proposed plans. They're usually less detailed and less complete than when we actually get a public hearing matter. They're just thoughts that developers are having, asking for our feedback before they make a formal presentation. When the formal presentation comes at that time, public can give comments. That said, we do get comments from the public already on public hearing matters and sketch plan reviews through a variety of technologies. We get people leave voicemails through the city. They also contact the city. There's an email drop box there, and there's also Edina has this tool called bettertogetheredina.org, and people leave comments there also. So that's my introduction. With that, I'd like to introduce staff member Liz Olson to do the roll call.
Thank you. Commissioner Strauss?
Here.
Commissioner Agnew?
Present.
Commissioner Miranda?
Here.
Commissioner Berube?
Here.
Commissioner Cullen?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Chair Numrov?
Here. Thank you. The next matter on our agenda is the approval of the agenda, which was circulated late last week. I'm not aware of any changes. Are there any changes to the agenda? That said, so for our viewers possible, because we're doing these remote meetings, we're legally required to do roll votes for everything, and that can include 3 or 4 roll votes for each matter, actually. So you're going to hear a lot of us just going through, and Ms. Olson's going to recite our names, and we're going to say aye or nay or yes or no. So does anyone move to approve tonight's agenda?
So move to the agenda as submitted.
And I will second that.
Thanks. Ms. Olson, could you do a roll vote, please?
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew?
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Chair Numrov?
Thanks. The fourth matter on our agenda tonight is the approval of meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was December 9th, 2020. Has everyone had a chance to review it? Does anyone have any comments or changes to those minutes? Motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes as submitted.
Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Ms. Olson, please do a roll vote.
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew?
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Chair Numrov?
Well, and that takes us to our first public hearing. It's 7:05, meeting started at 7, and we're at our first public hearing matter. It's a variance request for 5716 Wooddale Avenue. I am actually going to recuse myself for this matter and turn the meeting over to Commissioner Berube.
All right. So our first step will be for staff to tell us more details about what this variance is.
Thank you. Subject property is located at 5716 Wooddale Avenue. It consists of a single-family home with an attached two-car garage. The request is for a 5.3-foot side yard setback variance. The house is located on the west side, is highlighted. The property has a very small porch on the south side of the house. It's about 5 feet wide by 11 feet deep, so it's only about 60 square feet or so. The property owners would like to extend it into the rear yard. You can see the proposed area of extension. They would like to continue that sidewall into the rear yard. Unfortunately, the existing porch is already non-conforming. It's 4.9 feet away from the south lot line. The minimum side yard setback is 10 feet. And the back corner of the new porch would be 4.7 feet away. So it's just slightly closer. The sidewall of that porch, of the south wall, is not parallel to the south lot line. The existing space, and here's a photograph of the front of it, is unconditioned, and it's quite small. They would like to expand it into the backyard. Here's a photo of the rear yard so that they can connect up with the deck area and overlook the rear yard. Here's a rendering of that extension. It shows the existing portion and then also the new portion. It'll be on posts. There's no foundation or basement underneath it. This is the existing floor plan. You can see the porch is quite small and not very functional. They would like to turn it into a space that's more usable and conditioned. It really is an extension of that south wall at a non-conforming setback. It just so happens that it's just a little bit closer to that side yard as it gets towards the rear yard. Here's some proposed elevations, very similar to the renderings. And again, they'd be able to then access the deck area in the rear yard currently. And another rendering showing the back of that porch. There's no grading that's going to occur, so the engineering memo is quite brief. There really isn't any issue in terms of that. So the practical difficulties that prevent a reasonable use is that the porch is existing, it's non-conforming, it's also not square with the south lot line, so any extension is going to require a variance. Granting the variance won't alter the essential character of the neighborhood. The applicants are hoping to provide an additional interior space and a small, narrow porch. It's very non-functional currently, and it's not conditioned. The addition will look seamless, and as part of the original house, you won't be able to see much, if anything, from the street unless you see, kind of the side angle of it. So really isn't, from a streetscape standpoint, much change. Staff does recommend approval of the 5.3-foot side yard setback variance for the property at 5716 Wooddale Avenue, subject to the survey and elevations date stamped in December 2021, and it will comply with the engineer's memo. With that, I can stop and answer any questions that you may have. I know the homeowner, Melissa Bolton, is here, and then I believe the builder, Adam Bender, is as well. So I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
And I have
All right.
a question. I have a question for Chris.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead, Commissioner Strauss.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sheila. Change of leadership here. Okay. Chris, simple. Was there any reaction or any feedback from the neighbor to the south? I guess it would be.
We did not, to the south, we didn't receive any comments from any of the neighbors through Better Together Edina or after mailing out public hearing notices.
Okay. And I mean, it's pretty clear. It's just that that wall is just extending pretty much on the same line, and it's just that things aren't quite squared up. That it's not, so it's not really changing the situation, just extending that wall line, right? Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do any other commissioners have any questions for Planner Acker? If not, let's hear from the homeowner and or the builder.
Well, this is the homeowner. This is Melissa Boughton, and thank you for giving me just a brief moment to explain what we're doing. It is the porch as it stands right now is, I will call it an appendage. It's really not a room. It's unconditioned. The windows no longer close. It has sagging floors. The electrical is not up to code. So it really would serve as storage space only. And together with the professionals from Aspiri, the plan is to make it an architectural feature that complements the house and the lot. It will become my office to work from and a usable 4-season room. And along with landscaping, a new roof, and painting the entire home, I'm really excited how this home will look. It has incredible interior architectural features. It just needed some updating on the outside. And granting this variance will allow us to continue, and I truly hope you will support our request.
Thank you. And would the builder, general contractor, choose to speak now?
Thank you for hearing our case. I'm gonna try to share one thing here briefly, which is a drawing that I did, which one moment. Okay, can you all see this? This is a drawing that we've done. This rectangle to the right represents the existing space today as it is. This bold line on the south is the property line. This dashed line is the setback line if we were to build a conforming structure. And so it just more closely shows the footprint of what's there today versus what we're looking to add. So it's literally a 3-inch closer extension to the property line than what we have today. And if there are any questions, we're happy to answer those at this time.
All right. Do any of the commissioners have questions for either the homeowner or the builder at this point? It looks like there are no questions. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Public hearing?
Oh, public hearing. Sorry. Those little details. Okay, we'll have a public hearing. Is there anybody on the phone?
This is Dan with Communications. As of right now, we have one person on the line, no one in queue. So if we want to wait a minute, they can hit *1 if they would like to ask a question or make comment. They'll have 3 minutes, and I've got 7:15 right now. So if we wait about 1 minute till 7:16 and no one joins, we should be able to move forward. I'll let you know.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for the reminder, Carrie. The public hearings, of course, are some of the most important things that we do because we certainly want to hear from neighbors or other people in the community. For some of these items, there are no comments, but we shall see. I think the death of a radio talk show host are those 60 seconds of silence.
Okay, we do have one person in queue who is going to make comment, and I would ask that the operator unmute the line of Mr. Steve, and I apologize if I mispronounced Stronchek is what I'm going to go with, but he should be on in 1 moment.
All right, sure. 1 moment here, then.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, we hear you, Mr. Stronczek.
The only reason I spoke up now is if I'm the only one on the line for the next variance request, I just didn't want you waiting for me. So that's all.
Okay, thank you. We will keep you on hold then and have you pop in for after the next session.
With that, he is still our only caller, so I think you can go ahead and move forward.
All right. So at this point, if there's no other questions or comments or issues to discuss, I would check with the commissioners and see if anybody would like to make a motion.
I move to close the public hearing.
Do we have a second? So I think we will have to take a roll call to close the public hearing.
Thank you. Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew?
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye. All right, thank you. Okay, now I'll ask for the motion. Would anybody like to make a motion regarding this subject?
Move to approve the variance.
Thanks, Mr. Miranda. And is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. So we have a motion and we have a second, and we'll need a roll call.
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew?
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye. All right. And with that, the motion passes, and we will move to our next item.
Hello, everyone. It's Ian again. Good job. So our next item, thank you very much, Commissioner Berube. Our next item is another variance for 5117 Richmond Drive. And I believe Ms. Acker is presenting for the city on that one also.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
The subject property is at 5117 Richmond Drive, and it's for an 8.35 foot front yard setback variance. The property is located south of Richmond Drive. It's a very interesting lot. It has a lot of street frontage, and then it's pie shaped, so it comes back to almost a point in the back of the lot. So it is a difficult lot to deal with in terms of side yard setbacks, front yard setbacks, given its configuration. It's not a very traditional lot. So this is a existing survey of the property, and what we're proposing to do is add 2 feet onto the front of the garage. And there's the reason why it's an 8.3 foot front yard setback variance request is because the required front yard setback is based on the average front yard setback of the homes on either side. So the house is non-conforming currently in terms of front yard setback, which isn't surprising. You can see that the front corner of the south portion of the house conforms to the average front yard setback, which is 32.3 feet. But as you go towards the front of the garage and to the very front corner, it gets closer and closer to the front lot line. It's about 26 feet away. We'd like to reduce that to 24 feet. The garage, while looking at the survey, it looks like it has some depth to it. It actually is quite shallow. There's a room behind the garage, and so they've always struggled with the fact that it's not a standard 2-car garage. They can't actually fit 2 cars into it. What they will be doing, or hoping to be doing, is they'll be adding a mudroom and doing some improvements to the interior of the house, while adding that 2 feet onto the front of the garage would allow them to park both cars in the garage. 2-foot extension will actually still be less than the current 3-foot overhang that is on the house. So in terms of streetscape, you really won't see much of a difference between what is there currently and what they're proposing. So this is the front elevation that they're proposing, rear elevation, which really won't change. And then the side elevation, they will just be extending that front of the garage. This is the existing front of the garage by 2 feet. And this vehicle then would be able to fit inside the garage. This is the new rendering. And as you can see, there really isn't a whole lot of difference between what's existing and what's being proposed, with the exception that it will come forward just by 2 feet, still be underneath what the existing overhang is currently, which is 3 feet. There will be no grading and drainage involved in this plan. It's just a 2-foot extension on a current driveway. So the grading and drainage and memo was very minimal from the engineering department. So the primary issue is, is the proposed variance justified? Is it reasonable? Practical difficulty is designing for the existing home in its present location with the lot configuration. One portion of the house meets the ordinance requirements for front yard setback, but as you get further towards the north, towards that corner of the garage, it becomes non-conforming, and they're really limited. You can't push further back. When I met with the contractor, I asked the question, can you move further back into the rear yard? And they're already non-conforming on that north side. The north side yard setback is 6.9 feet, which is non-conforming. It should be 10 feet. So we really have no other alternative or opportunity. The existing home was built in 1950. It met the current code at the time. It is non-conforming currently, but it'll be just a slight modification to the garage, and still under that overhang that is currently 3 feet. It would be reduced to, it would be just a 1-foot difference to what is currently there. Granting the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Other homes in the neighborhood are more spacious 2-car garages. It would allow this vehicle to be parked within the garage instead of outside. And it's also part of the plan to improve interior spaces in the home. Staff does recommend approval of the 8.3-foot front yard setback variance for the proposed addition at 5117 Richmond Drive. Approval should be subject to the survey and elevations in date stamped in December and October 2020, and then compliance with the conditions of the engineer's memo, which is very brief because there won't be any grading involved. With that, I can stop and answer any questions that you have. The representatives from M.A. Peterson are here, and also the homeowners, Steve Stronach and Pam Erickson. With that, I will stop and answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Acker. Do any members of the Planning Commission have any questions for staff at this time? Speak up if you do. Just feel free. All right. Hearing or seeing none, I invite the applicant to speak about the project if you like, either the homeowner or the developer.
All right. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. We got our computer.
Now we've lost you.
Hi, I'm Pam Erickson.
You might need to mute your microphone or your speaker, excuse me. Microphone should be on and your speaker should be off. I'm saying.
It sounded to me like there was more of a connectivity.
Mr. Stronach, your microphone's off.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. Yeah, thank you for giving us consideration, and thank you for patience with our video audio system. Chris said it very well. The issue is we can't fit our truck in the garage lengthwise or height-wise. So really the only option is to make the garage slightly larger, and we do have non-conforming all around. So moving it forward really is the best option we saw. We're trying to do this as modestly as we can so we don't affect the neighborhood in that. So we're just asking to push it out the bare minimum to get the truck in the garage. So otherwise, I really can't add much more. Otherwise, we're really looking forward to this, and we appreciate your help on it.
Do any members of the Planning Commission have questions for the applicant? Okay, well, this is a public hearing, and people may have questions later. They can, but it's a public hearing. If members of the public wish to give a comment to this matter, you can dial 1-800-374-0221, conference ID 789-1804, and press *1 on your telephone keypad, and you'll be placed into queue. You'll have up to 3 minutes to speak, and staff will let you know when you're approaching or hitting the 3 minutes. Well, other Dan, do we have anyone calling in?
I believe we do not. We did have the homeowner himself, as you may have heard on the previous one. There's no one else on the call, but we can go ahead and give it the customary minute to see if anyone does that.
We'll wait a second. A moment. If anyone wants to call in, it's 1-800-374-0221, conference ID 789-1804, and press *1.
I think we can likely go ahead here. It's been about a minute, and we do not have anyone in the queue.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Other Dan. So we did receive one comment on this matter from on Better Together, and it was a neighbor saying that they were in favor. So with that, sound like we're done with the public hearing section. Is there a member of the Planning Commission that will move to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
Ms. Olson, could you do a roll vote to close the public hearing?
Thank you. Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew?
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Chair Nemrov?
Okay, so that closes the public hearing, which is the opportunity for Planning Commission to discuss this matter or make a motion if someone would like to make a motion for or against approval. Does anyone have any comments, any questions or a motion?
I'll make a motion. Yeah, I'll make I can't see any issues with this, and hopefully the process wasn't too gruesome for the applicant that they had to go through it. But I know we need to look at these, but it certainly is pretty straightforward what they're requesting. So I move to approve the variance as submitted.
I second.
Thanks. Motion second. Is there any further discussion? Anyone have any further comments? Okay. Ms. Olson, could you a roll vote, please, on the motion to approve this variance?
Thank you. Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Agnew?
Aye.
I'm sorry. Commissioner Agnew, can you repeat yourself?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Chair Nemrov?
So that approves it unanimously. Congratulations to the applicants and good luck. Well, that closes the public hearing section of tonight's meeting. And now we move on. We have two sketch plans this evening. The first one is for 4917 Eden Avenue, which a lot of us know is the Perkins location. I think I remember when Perkins went in many, many years ago. Presenting for the city is Community Development Director, also known as Planning Director, Carrie Teague.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. So I'm sharing my screen. Does everyone see that? Okay. So as mentioned, this is the Perkins site, kitty corner from City Hall along Highway 100 and just west of the Edina Country Club. This property is zoned planned commercial district, but it also has an automobile parking district attachment to it. I'll show a graphic in a minute, but it's for the parking lot to the south. I don't know the history behind that, although the city has a past of zoning parking lots and parking structures with this designation. As an example, the Fairview Hospital parking ramp across France, that has that same zoning designation. So this site has them both. There's a height overlay district of 4 stories and 48 feet for this site. It's guided in the comprehensive plan for mixed use, so the same as the commercial district within Grandview. Here's a look at the site. So you can kind of see on this picture, the top platform is the parking for Perkins, and the parking lot to the south has that automobile parking district designation on it. So what the applicant's proposing is removing the Perkins structure and constructing a 7-story housing apartment. So on the east side, you can see here, and on the west side, an office building, a 4-story office building, about a little over 50,000 square feet. The apartments would be 208 units, 7 stories tall, and they're proposing to do 20% of the units for affordable housing within the project. So, as you know, many of our recent proposals, the housing, the affordable housing piece wasn't within the project. This one is, so I see that as a positive. Here's a couple of renderings. I'll let the applicant describe the building as part of their presentation, but you can see the residential structure with the office, and on the west side. It would be a shared parking arrangement between the two with underground parking. So this site, again, located within the Grandview district, the Grandview transportation plan has a new off-ramp and frontage road that impacts this property. So the graphic on the screen shows the potential for that new off-ramp and frontage road that would eventually connect with 50th Street. So here's the site we're looking at. So as you see, it would run right through the middle of that office building. So what the applicant has done is provided an option B. So we've got 2 options here. The second would be the dedication of that easement for the proposed road, then with the housing on the east side. So just quickly, I'll show a couple of renderings. Won't steal the thunder of the applicant, but you can see the residential structure, and then we would have green space in the meantime on the west side of the building. So with option A, with the office, flexibility would be required through, so it would be a rezoning to PUD, and so flexibility would be required for setbacks on all sides. As you can see, the building is pulled pretty tight on all sides of the project. The 7-story building would exceed the 4-story maximum. The FAR here is 3.0. The FAR requirement within this district is 1.0. But to give you a little bit of a perspective for what 3.0 represents, the 70th and France project that we considered a couple of months ago, or within the last month or so, that had an FAR of 2.1. So a 3.0 is pretty high for Edina. And they would be requesting some flexibility in regard to parking spaces, but there would be a shared element between the office and residential. So with the option B, the housing only, they were able to shift the building to the west, so there would be a greater setback on Wilson Road. That's the east road. Still a little bit tight on Eden Avenue, Again, more space, of course, adjacent to Highway 100. Again, flexibility for the 7 stories. The FAR would be reduced to 2.4. One additional thing to consider when we're looking at FAR is not only the mass of the building, but the traffic that's generated from that building. So while the FAR for a residential project is relatively high here, it's not going to be generating as much traffic if there's no office or medical office element to it. So this request would require a rezoning from those 2 zoning designations to PUD. That would ensure the affordable housing piece and provide some of that flexibility for height and setback. So for the Planning Commission to discuss and consider would be the 2 options, the density, how that ties into the Grandview Transportation Plan. Staff is more amenable to that option B. The density that's proposed here would be 100 units an acre, which is the top end allowed within this district. So they would be maxing out the site just with the housing piece. Again, with the affordable housing within the project is a positive. Some consideration on those setbacks. Staff has a little bit of a concern. The 10-foot setback to the north is a little bit tight. Perhaps the building can be shifted to the south. The enhanced landscaping. There are green roof and solar shown in this initial concept. We'd like to see that remain as we move forward. So I will stop there, answer any questions that you might have. Otherwise, the development team is here to provide a little more detail on the structures and the programming here.
Thanks a lot, Kerry. Do any members of the Planning Commission have questions? Commissioner Strauss.
Yes, Kerry, a question, maybe you can address it. Can you go back to the plan view, the one showing the possible off-ramp? There was an earlier. Yes, that one will work. That will work. So the proposed office building, I mean, is that still on Perkins land, or would it be their intention to acquire it from MnDOT if they weren't going to do that frontage road?
It would be on their land. That MnDOT property is this blue dashed line. Rather awkward. It might be something we consider doing a vacation in the future, but at this point, they were not encroaching into that right of way, other than that access aisle to the surface parking.
And then that new exit ramp or frontage road, would that then eliminate that rather circular as you go past Eden and curve back? Is that then eliminated?
Yeah, that's the intent, is to eliminate. So that would be located right here. So that would be eliminated should this, with the construction of the frontage road here.
Okay. And what kind of timeline does MnDOT work with? I mean, are they going to get back to you?
Yep, that's a good question. So there's nothing imminent about that happening. There's a lot that would have to take place. This could be 10, maybe in the short term, 10 years, but probably even farther out in the future than that. But this development provides us at least the opportunity to acquire that land, kind of get the ball rolling to develop this concept. This would be the first step. So we would see that as a pretty significant step in trying to make this happen. But there's no doubt it would likely be out in the future.
And maybe this really isn't for you, but just my observation is that, we kind of talk about density where it may work, and this particular parcel, seems to be buffered on all 4 sides from any impacts. I mean, it seems like it's not going to be looming over any particular, certainly any kind of neighborhood or commercial. operations. So, okay, thank you.
Do any other commissioners have questions for staff at this time?
This is Joanne. I do.
Great.
Or go ahead.
Commissioner
Okay.
Olson.
Okay. So Carrie, has MnDOT been informed of this? Or do you have any comments from them yet?
We have not. This isn't anything that, we're ready to try to move forward with. At this point, it's the opportunity to acquire the right-of-way. I know Chad Milner, the city engineer, is often in contact with them. So whether he's mentioned this project specifically, I don't believe so.
Okay. And I know I'm going to be saying a 4-letter word with lid, with actually just a 3-letter word. But is that still being considered at all in this area?
It is not. No, as you remember, as part of the comprehensive plan, it's not really considered there at all. So the concept being development over Highway 100. So it's all right of way. Should that ever be considered in the future, it would be a comprehensive plan amendment to add that land use consideration. So right now it's right of way, not really considered for development. So no, this isn't a precursor to the lid.
Oh, I wasn't assuming that. I was just seeing if that. No, I didn't have any. Okay, thank you.
And again, I can't see everyone right now. But do other commissioners? Is that Lou?
Yes.
Commissioner Miranda.
Yeah, Carrie, do you know what the history is with that MnDOT triangle of land? I mean, it doesn't seem like it looks relevant to anything MnDOT would be interested in related to Highway 100.
I don't. Yeah, I don't know, but it is strange.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask is that, a lot of what we're looking at, including some of mixed words on the next thing we'll be looking at, is trying to, keep the buildings hugging the road, hugging the sidewalk, so to speak. And so this kind of pulls back because of that MnDOT land. And I was just wondering if the city or developer has approached MnDOT about acquiring that or trading that or whatever.
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility to vacate that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners have questions for staff? Planner Teague, I had one question back about the road. If the road was to be redone, I see the off-ramp. You've shown the off-ramp. What would happen to the on-ramps to Highway 100? Would they stay how they are today, or would those change also?
Yeah, I should have brought a better graphic that shows that. This one really does not. It just shows the frontage road. It's really just the leg that impacts this site. As we're discussing, as the applicant is making their presentation, I'll take a look at the Grandview plan and see. But I believe the intent is we just have I'll share my screen here. Is to have the exit here, and then the on-ramp would be the existing off of 50th. I believe that's the case, but I will verify that. And then so these circular on-ramp and off-ramp, they would both go away.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. Any other commissioners have any questions for staff at this time? Or well, let's go to the applicant then. We look forward to hearing your presentation. Welcome. Who will be speaking for the applicant tonight?
Nick Walton's here. Can you guys hear me? Carrie, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I'll be speaking tonight with Chris from BKV. I wanted to walk through this a little bit together. So thank you, commissioners, for having us. I'm Nick Walton, the president of Royal Walton Development. I'm just going to maybe touch on a little bit of history just on us, and then we'll dive right into the presentation. And I'll touch a little bit on a couple of those MnDOT questions because we spent a little time trying to inquire if MnDOT would be interested in talking to us about that triangular piece, and haven't heard anything back from them yet. So we would definitely be interested in talking about that. A couple of just quick things about us. We're local. Our focus is on urban projects with high design. Early in my career, I actually did a lot of work in single-family projects, like some of the things we were looking at with the first two agenda items tonight. Some of those were within about a mile of this site. And I point that out because we learned real early on to really focus in on design, and we bring that to our multifamily projects in apartment buildings as well as hotels that we've developed. Just by way of track record, we've now developed 32 ground-up projects in the metro area. And part of the success in making all those happen is collaboration with the cities that we work in and the surrounding neighborhood groups. So we're excited to be here tonight. We've been looking forward to this meeting, and then we have another one next week. We want to get this conversation going with you all. And then last week, we actually sent about 106 letters out to the neighborhoods around us, specifically Sunny Slope and Gulf Terrace. Some of those neighbors that received our letters have already reached out and started conversations with our development team. So our goal is to have these two planning sketch plan meetings this week and next week, and then schedule some larger neighborhood group meetings and spend time collaborating and working with them. Another thing that's really important to point out to all of you, and we'll point it out to the neighbors as well, is that our application, I feel like, looks really final. Like I keep saying this, it looks like a really baked design, and it's not. It's the software we're using. We have spent a lot of time on sort of different versions before we wanted to present to you all. But I want to make sure that everyone knows that we're really here to listen, respond, try to incorporate comments that you all have into our proposed project. I also think it's important to note before we get into the presentation that Chris and I will do together, that if this project ends up proceeding, it's something that our company plans to hold for a long time, which we think is important. That local approach and a long-term hold is real different than when like a national developer, for example, looks at a site, might be a little more focused on bottom line. We're a lot more focused on process and the details within a project. We think that can really make projects special. And then a couple of things about the project, and now we'll start to get into that. One of the reasons that we think that site lends itself so well to this mixed use concept is we have the ability to put this beautiful residential project up against the country club, and then we can put an office that ends up being a visual as well as a sound buffer between the homes that we're going to create and the highway. But that office then gets to also have great signage and great presence. One of the comments that we heard from a neighbor was the idea of traffic flow, which is something that I know we'll be talking about. Right now, the way we've designed it is office traffic would come and go on Eden, but housing traffic would come and go on Wilson. And there's also, just based on the uses, those would be heavier at different times in the day. So that's something that the team looked into as we were designing this. And then just a little bit about the vision, kind of high level. So when we picture this project, we picture a higher end luxury living that fits in this beautiful country club location. And about half our units are set to be 2 bedrooms with the idea of having empty nesters in mind. So people that are ready to downsize from maybe their larger homes in nearby neighborhoods, but aren't ready to actually leave this neighborhood that they're in. For example, moving out to one of the new projects in Southdale, which is great for certain residents of Edina, may not be what they're looking for. So this provides that alternative. And then we've got a bunch of really cool amenities that we've programmed into this. So, Chris, if you want to maybe start on the presentation, and you and I can make comments along the way here.
Yeah, absolutely. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yep.
Great. Hi, I'm Chris Pelkwich. I am an architect and partner with BKV Group. We are a local architecture firm based in Minneapolis and have been doing business for 42 years. And for just a couple of Edina projects that our firm has worked on, the Edina City Hall and the One Southdale Place project at the edge of the mall at the triangular site. So we've done some more, but we know the city, and we pride ourselves in doing good work within Edina, and we're excited to present this option today as well. I think Carrie did a very good job of walking through the site and familiarizing everybody with where we're at overall. The one piece I will want to point out with it, though, is he talked about some of the base zoning, and the future land use has this as a mixed use center and looks at 20 to 100 units an acre. And what we really took in the comp plan as we started and went through that to visualize what the site may become overall. And the existing zoning is, I think, meant for something a little smaller and doesn't maybe grasp what the comp plan is going for overall, or at least our read of it overall. You can see that looking a little bit more closely at some of the roads and some of the pedestrian ways and some of the public realm around the site right now are a bit aged and worn. And part of our project will be to update that and really create a great pedestrian and landscape experience and really upgrade this area, particularly near the City Hall, and create a high quality development. So going to the option A, the option that we were talking about, the office and the residence. And what I want to say is we really wanted to come to sketch plan before the neighborhood is, I think, maybe atypical to how, when we worked with Nick before, how we go about doing things. Oftentimes you'd reach out to the neighborhood first, but with this potential roadway impact, we felt like this was the correct step in this particular instance to come here first and then go back to the neighbors, and we have a little clearer direction. It could certainly impact what we're trying to present and the next steps we take in the development of this. But we're definitely excited about this being a mixed use project, of having the 208 residents open with the building fronting Eden Avenue, and then opening up the courtyard towards the country club, really to kind of continue that amenity for the building, but also to open it up to the country club, as you see on some of the other homes that are along the country club, to play off some of the architectural context that's also within the area. And then placing the office to the west gives us that opportunity to really put it near Highway 100. It does step back down from the residential building, as it's a 4-story building, and then it's split with a surface parking. And what Nick had mentioned was that access to parking. So off of Eden here, there's an existing curb cut for Perkins that goes through the MnDOT land that's been discussed. And we're really just reutilizing that same curb cut. And I mean, certainly it'd be nice if we could straighten it out a little bit better, but we want to start slow here. And looked at how that could go into a surface parking lot and then loop into the shared 2-story below grade parking. And then over on Wilson Road, we have the kind of on the naturally low side of the site, we have the parking entry to minimize any ramping on the site overall, and what those impacts are to the landscape and retaining walls around the site. And we also have a drop-off area that's near the main entry of the project.
And a little history on that drop-off. One of the design components was we wanted part of this to have a boutique hotel feel, especially at the entrance, something with just a real high design. And this sort of a drop-off porte cochere experience is something that you'd see in that setting. So a lot of our urban projects don't have the land to do something like this. Design-wise, it's great, but it's also really useful. So that's a little bit of the history on the drop-off that comes off of Wilson.
And one last comment on this plan is just to note, and you'll see it more on the renderings, but we are creating a plaza space to really be more of a public amenity along the corner of the space here that will have sculptures within it and really complement the City Hall overall. looking at the plan just a little bit more, as I mentioned before, we have 2 levels of below grade parking, so it primarily creates a project that is nearly fully structured parking. We have some convenience stalls for the office for visitors at grade, and then a few at grade stalls at the drop-off zone as well for Ubers and other type of pickups like that is what we really looked at it for being. And just zooming in this just a little bit to show the plan, you can see the drop-off in the hatched area for that art plaza on the corner, lobby wrapping that space, so it's going to be glassy and active. And it was really mentioned that the setback along Eden could be a little bit more. And we were, because of the way that the building slopes, or that naturally angles away from the street with the property line, we were being deliberate to put it up near the street to kind of have a little bit stronger pedestrian impact at that shorter length of the site. And then we actually have a veranda that comes out, a 2-story veranda that plays off of the 2-story entry feature at City Hall that you'll see a little bit more clearly in the renderings as well. And that increases the public realm area and the walkability of this space. I apologize, one more, and then just the levels going up, pretty standard levels of this. Again, the office being 4 stories and the housing going up. And on the 7th level, we do have an amenity and outside space and begin to step the top level back. And that's been a little bit developed further in the renderings that you'll see as well. And then option B is, this is the same slide Carrie was showing previously. And one thing that's interesting to note with this that we got from the 2016 transportation plan is that there is the potential for 2 future sites to the north as well. Certainly we wouldn't have any ownership of them, but just something for the Planning Commission to be aware of, that, this may create some additional impacts on the city and the city infrastructure. With this plan, we maintained the residential building to be approximately the same, but what we did is we increased the setback along Wilson an additional 20 feet here to begin to center the building a little bit more between the new proposed roadway and Wilson Road overall. And we added some additional surface stalls on this, but we really maintained some of the same site amenities of the Art Plaza as the same at this point overall. Got a little lag here with it. One moment, please. All right, here are the plans for that as well. So we're looking at a 2-story parking structure, again, to mainly focus all of the stalls on structured parking and to have the ramping internal to the building to really minimize any site impacts. You can see the courtyard is positioned in the same location with that drop off to really get cars off the street, as there's not parking stalls on either of these streets right now. We're trying to really make sure the traffic maintains internal to the site overall. And then we have this additional green space that we developed with the site as well. And then similar upper floors of the building, and then the same setback that you saw previously. To get into the design and architecture of the project, as Carrie flashed for a moment, we had an initial design, and we'll show that for just another moment again because it relates to the office. And then through feedback and meetings with neighbors, other people around Edina, we really, Nick had us go back to the drawing board a little bit, and we came back with a new concept that we really worked through as a development team to be something a little bit richer and a little bit more of Edina that we really felt, and really designed it to be something of Edina. So some of that immediate context, Grange Hall immediately north across the street. City Hall, as you mentioned before, has a few items that we've really looked at for influence within this. That the 2-story entry fin along City Hall, that we have a 2-story veranda that you'll see, then will be within a couple 100 feet. So we have a similar massing to that. But then the materiality of City Hall, of the buff stone and the copper, is something that when BKV designed the City Hall, working with the city previous, really looked at the historic character of the city and some of the materiality. And we're really looking to do that again with this new design as well. We also looked a little bit wider around this area as well, and we looked at some of the context that are some newer projects, but really capture a little bit more of a historic aesthetic with the strong base, middle, and top within these projects, and more ornamentation and detail overall than you may see in some of the more modern shaped buildings. And then lastly, we look to the homes, as I mentioned before, that really Edina is a city with a lot of homes, and really looked at the homes for materiality and quality and window shaping to also assist us in some of our design thinking. And I want to point out that the 3 homes with stars on them are also right on the golf course. So we're looking at the immediate context for impact. But some of the things to point out and some of these have been updated. Some, are a little more of the original Rambler, but have maybe had some updates as well. But some of the strong things we see in the historic homes are, again, that buff stone. We're seeing white framing and different cement board within the homes, or it could be wood siding in some of this instance. And we're also seeing copper and use of metal panel in some of the locations as well, but more as an accent piece. So the reason we're coming back with this initial concept is it's something we liked, but it also was something that displayed the office and the massing of the office, and to give people a little bit better sense that you can see that stepping down we mentioned, and that separation of the buildings by 75 or 80 feet overall to create some space within the center of the site.
And in this design concept, we, again, a lot of the overall massing is the same, but as you can see, some of the different copper colors, for example, that we had in the building, that was really trying to speak to some of the copper in City Hall. And when we did this, our current design, which is the one we like the most, as Chris said, we looked a little further into neighborhoods and tried to bring more of a residential influence into it. There it is.
So with this design, we looked at those layers of context, and we wanted the more traditional building with a 2-story base of the stone base of a Casota type stone, looking at white brick as being defining a lot of the massing of the building, and then cement board siding in the mid-gray tone to connect the pieces of the building. And the reason to do that is to break down some of the massing. But as I mentioned before, the 2-story veranda piece, really to have a kind of a multi-fold influence in the context, that it relates to the City Hall entry, it relates to the porch off of the country club on the golf course side, and also has that second floor seating area up here. It also wraps copper on the underside of things here as well to really create a rich experience along this corner. And then it's further complemented by the sculptures and the art plaza that we're anticipating on the corner as one of the items that we recognize we're asking for a little bit more density. So we want to have items that we're giving as well back as pieces. And then further,
go ahead.
Okay, and then further, as we designed the massing, we did begin to step back the upper floor of this as well a little bit further as we developed it further, recognizing that we are a little bit taller and we do want to be a little bit softer as we come to the intersection as we're along Eden Avenue.
And then even in the divided light detail is something that's very unique to very common in residential in single-family houses, and very uncommon in multifamily. But that was another residential detail that we tried to pull into this, as well as the pergola up top and some of the lighting down below.
Another view, this is from Wilson Road, really standing back at the country club, looking back in and seeing that we really split the building massing down into 2 buildings overall and created a link. And you can see the link back here, rather glassy with copper accents. You can see we're using the copper accents around and throughout the building and on the light fixtures overall. But you
And
can see the open space and the drop off here and the opening and clear sense of entry and access to the building.
And the link is something that we think is really special. So in a typical building, you all have seen many of them, this building would be a U shape. There'd be units on either one of these legs, but then there'd also be units on the turn, on the link. And instead, we thought this was just a really neat design detail. One, now we have these two buildings, which breaks it up, but also that's west. So as we have the sun setting in the west, it's going to shine through what's like an all glass wall link that then will shine through all the way into Wilson, but also onto this courtyard that we have completely programmed with different amenities. And it'll share all that light, especially since we're an east-facing building.
A few more here. This is further along Eden Avenue where the building starts to angle back from the roadway with the property line. And this is where we continue to break down the massing, as you can see with the creation of the white brick forms here, and then through step backs of the facade and material changes, that's where we begin to create edges that can be a little bit more visual to this rather than have a large massing block. And then there's also the recess here for that link that Nick just mentioned.
And one thing to point out, it's not as clear, I don't think, in this picture, but on plan view, that MnDOT piece. So we've reached out to MnDOT a couple of times, haven't heard back, and we were just calling about the triangle. It feels like there could potentially be some additional programming there. If that's land that we could end up securing from MnDOT, we'd like to program it more. We didn't want to assume that we could, since it's not ours to program right now, but that's something that is out there for consideration.
And that's the land right here that I was moving the cursor on.
Yeah.
And then with the bird's eye view here, you can see the relation to the country club overall, the relation to Wilson and Eden Avenues, or Wilson Road and Eden Avenue, excuse me. And then really one of the other features we have is on the roof of the building, we're looking at creating garden plots on the roof for the residents. And that would be a robust feature within the building on the north side, but then on the south side that we'd have a photovoltaic array for energy creation. And those are things that have been integrated to the design from the beginning. And we'll continue to study all the sustainability factors as we proceed forward, but it's definitely something that's part of the design. And then a couple more just additional views of the impact of the project overall here. The clearly seeing the link from a west side image here, which is a little bit more rudimentary model shot. Walk-ups at the edge of Eden Avenue before the project starts to fold back. And then here is where the building does start to angle back, and you really get that triangular MnDOT land and quite a bit of setback at that point. And then lastly, a couple more renderings of the vehicle drop-off and lobby through here and the parking up there, as well as a very active courtyard. And with that kind of really shows really where the design is at today. And we're excited to continue the conversation with you here.
Well, thank you very much. This is item of the City Planning Commission. So at this point in the sketch plan, this is when commissioners can ask further questions or give feedback. And so I'd like to invite any of the commissioners who would like to do either of those things to just jump on.
I have a question.
The Commissioner Berube.
Yes. So often we see development designs that include retail or office, more of a mixed use, whether it's just on the first floor or other floors. And I know yours, one of your plans would have a business office building, but if I understand this correctly, the actual residential units would be completely residential. So I wonder can you speak to the pros and cons, in your opinion, of having either retail or office within the residential building, and the pros and cons of that, and why you chose to not have that in this building?
Yeah, happily. So we've got a lot of projects that we've done over the years that would have, it would be in an urban setting that would have retail, most commonly on the first floor. We've done some where we put office on the second floor. And what we found we have a project that we just remodeled the office space that we had set aside on the second floor that never leased into 6 units because we couldn't end up finding tenants, and it was on Lake Street. It was in a location with a lot of traffic. It ends up being an office that, when I mentioned earlier that the office ends up being a little bit of a buffer, and it is, but also having that presence. If it's a freestanding building, it can be designed a little bit differently. It can have its own clear signage, its own clear entrance and parking, versus being something that's just part of an apartment building. And what ends up happening often is that the branding for the business and even just wayfinding to get to the business is just a lot more difficult in the building. So, like on paper, both work, but we find practically a freestanding building that's focused just on one use like office just a lot more successful. It's easier for us to build them in one. They work better when they're separate.
And what about demand? Do people, in your experience, do people appreciate having restaurants and retail on the first floor, or would they just as soon have an apartment building that's completely residence?
I think it's a really good question. One of the things we do program into some of our buildings, if we're going to end up doing retail, is we really start to focus on what is another amenity to the building. So like a coffee shop, a yoga studio, something along those lines, and we'll do small retail. So from the apartment perspective, that is great. What ended up happening from the demand perspective is you end up having empty retail on some of these. So that's one of the trade-offs. Empty retail, it's unactivated streetscape. That doesn't look good. So if we knew that there was a coffee shop or a yoga studio or something like that, for example, that could end up being an amenity to residents, we wouldn't be opposed to that. We've just found that, especially in today's environment, it's really difficult to make that work for the tenant, not for the apartment building. Actually, I want one other thing. We do already have interest in just word of mouth interest in the office building. So we're not getting ahead of ourselves here. We're just beginning the public process, which we're really excited to do now. But just testing a little bit. If there was a building and it was about this many square feet, might there be interest? There is interest compared to some of the empty retail we have. So,
is the interest you're seeing, or how you perceive that, would it be one tenant in the office building, or would it be more of an office suites?
Shared. I think the idea, it wouldn't be a dozen, but I don't think it's the one. It might be 2 or 3, based on the size of users we've talked to.
It's helpful.
Ian, I have a comment.
Commissioner Miranda.
No, I think that was Jerry, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. I had a comment.
All right, my bad hearing. Okay, hi, Jerry. Commissioner Strauss.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, but my comment to the presenters, I thought it was a particularly good narrative. You drew me into your scheme very quickly. That emphasizing your local connection and your knowledge of the area, I think was a particularly effective point. And your characterization of the areas, aged and worn, is, maybe I never really expressed that, but it's certainly that is my experience. And I'm in this area practically daily. And I've always thought that may be one of the most familiar points in Edina. And I don't know if it's because of Perkins flagpole or what, but it's, I think everybody knows if you mention that site, they know exactly what you're talking about. So I think, so what the detail of your sketches, you're right. We usually don't see. We see usually much more just kind of boxier or kind of placeholding, buildings. And I understand, how that typically happens. But I liked the level that you presented. It really pulled me into your own ideas and possibilities. And I, things will be very different, probably will be. But I liked that detail. It drew me into the project also. And another thing that excited me was that potential of that that area which would be north of this project. And then also I noticed the property just to the south, the executive office plaza, sometimes to me seemed rather, dated too, but wow, what a possibility of this whole east side of 100 could be. What a great possibility. So, yeah, I guess that was it. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for sharing. Those are helpful comments. Hey, Chris, can you re-share that image? Or is that your screen?
Yes, it was. Carrie asked me to hold it for now in case there's more direct questions, so people can see each other's faces.
Gotcha. I was excited to see the project.
Any other commissioners with comments or questions?
This is Joanne. I have one.
Hi, Joanne. Commissioner Olson. You can have 3 or more.
I can have 15, and apologize as always on WebEx. When I turn on my camera, it freezes, so you just hear my voice. The question I had for you, I know that you've reached out to MnDOT and Carrie. I don't know your comfort with this, but I think if they don't respond, maybe even if the city could reach out to MnDOT, because that's really a critical piece to understand what the future is going to be or what MnDOT's role, if they will allow you to potentially, if they could vacate it and you could acquire it and what you can do with that property. But my question is, if that was property that you could control, would you still have that angle in your building, or would you prefer it to be straight along Eden? I don't know if maybe we do need to see the site plan again because I know you had to accommodate the design because of the MnDOT property. I guess if it was like the perfect world, and I love having that green space. I don't know that I'd want to get rid of it, but I guess I just wanted to ask you what you originally would have done if you had access to that property.
It's a great question. Great. We have these double loaded corridors, so the spacing, the width of the bar would be the same. Chris, would you have not put as much of would you split the difference a little bit, or would you still angle it back? I definitely also envision still having green space on this side. I think against Eden, that's really nice. But would any of that have been used up for building? Maybe not as sharp of an angle?
I would agree. I think it would have it'd be a little less sharp angle just because it pinches down a little bit where the link is for the courtyard experience, just particularly on the building design. But on the urban design, there is something nice to having the angle that softens the size of the building and the experience as you're coming over the bridge from Eden Avenue, what that experience would be.
Great, thank you. And then the other question is, you're showing in the rendering that nice sidewalk, continuing towards 100. Again, maybe this was a question for staff, but do you have the ability to provide such an amenity or an extension of the sidewalk? Because is that going across MnDOT property?
It looks like we maybe lost Nick there for a moment. We would have to work with MnDOT to allow to let them make improvements within their land. And it's something we've discussed as a team and we'd be interested in doing because it is really it's really the front yard of our building from Eden Avenue. So it's something we'd want to do.
Right, and that connection's very important. Okay. Those are just the questions, comments. I mean, I like what you did, your second or this new concept that you've come up with. I really like that versus the first one you had. And I prefer the concept B and without the office. Oh, I did have one last question. You're showing more parking than is required for the housing. Can you explain why?
Internally, from working with Reuter Walton, that they felt the right goal of housing for this would be 1.35 to 1.4 stalls per unit. And that's something that we, is certainly open for discussion. And that's where on the office building portion, we're really looking at it as a shared, shared parking opportunity, just so that way we wouldn't have to build quite as much parking overall.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, Chris, I'm back on. I got kicked off, so I can hear you, but I can't see you guys.
Okay. No problem.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson and the applicants. Do any other commissioners have any questions or comments?
I just have a general comment, if that's
great,
where we are in the process.
Definitely.
Okay, so in general, I like the design, and I really appreciate, even though this is just a sketch plan, you've obviously put a lot of thought into materials. It looks like a really quality building. What you call the link with the sun coming through seems really great. The one thing about this building, or I should say this project, it seems like it could be a total home run, or it could be a nothing wasteland. And it's all going to depend on connectivity, because it's such an odd little piece of land. And it sort of feels like it's out there. And even though you've got City Hall and you've got the country club and, the highway, so it's in some ways it's well connected, but you can't really walk anywhere. I mean, unless you're crossing a highway or you're crossing 50th or walking along 50th. And so it feels to me like the success of this would depend on how well the transportation all gets integrated, both public transportation as well as, the bike paths, the walking paths. So just my opinion when I look at this, it's appealing until I think about, like, how would you get anywhere? And it's not like being at 50th in France or 44th in France or on the other side of 100 where you've kind of got a natural node. Even just being across 100, it sort of feels like it's out there by itself. And so to me, it feels like that connectivity is so important and really speaks to the importance of being able to walk places, in my opinion. And so as I think through this, to me, that's what would be, the more you can make that connectivity, the more appealing it would be to me. Because the building in itself, I can see why people would find it attractive. So just my personal opinion.
This is Nick. I think that's really good feedback. I definitely picture some of our residents, walking to the west over the bridge. But you're right. It's urban in the sense it's off 50th Street, it's off Highway 100, but it's very residential, but not 50th and France residential, neighborhood residential. That even one of the commissioners mentioned it earlier. Yet it's not surrounded. There are neighborhoods nearby. We've sent out a bunch of letters to them, but not immediately adjacent. So we think it's special that way because it allows you to have this multifamily condition that's very connected to the golf course and has just a beautiful outdoor experience as well as the way the design of the building is. But the walkability piece, I think that's a good note.
Chair Nemiroff, may I share my screen and respond to that?
You definitely may.
Okay, so I took a page out of the Grandview Transportation Plan. So this, I think, might help answer the question. So this is our development site. So with the development of this frontage road, the idea is there would be sidewalks on both sides of the street. So a person living here could take the sidewalk up to this here is intended to be a pedestrian bridge that would connect City Hall over Highway 100 into the Grandview District on the west side. So there is a plan. It's a very long-range plan for connectivity. Being the first development in, they may have to wait a while, but this is the grand plan for the district. In the meantime, as mentioned, they would have to go across Eden Avenue to access to the west.
Thanks, Carrie. I did see that in the materials, and I think it just really speaks to how important it is to have people on board for those plans and to see, you know, what a really big difference it can make. Because I think fulfillment of that plan could be what makes this a great place to live. Otherwise, it is kind of out there, even though it's only half a mile from, conventional residential areas. But that's kind of a long way when you're.
Yeah, agreed. So this is the opportunity to.
The first step. The first step. Right? Yeah, very good.
Pardon me, commissioners. I do have a question that I would like that we'd like to ask as its sketch plan as it can continue to address comments. But a couple of the items where we need to resolve, I think today as well beyond the roadway, is the office plan is our preferred plan. That we really like the mixed use aspect of it, but we'd certainly like feedback within that, and then we'd also like feedback on height and FAR, as Carrie had pointed those out, that we are exceeding the maximum of the current underlying zoning. But as we said in the presentation, that looking to the future, the 2040 plan, I don't know what the zoning will be, but it looks like there may be some flexibility.
Do any commissioners want to comment on any of those issues?
Regarding the density and the height, because of what we just talked about, where even though it's not so far from residential areas, it still is kind of off on its own. That doesn't feel like it's too much to me, because there's no, there's huge buffers between what will be this development and the next, the individual residences. I like your argument for having the office building be a buffer. I guess I'd be a little bit concerned about the traffic, because I think most people, my perception in the conversations I've had with people, the issues aren't typically density in and of itself. It's traffic and safety. And if you've got office buildings where you've got a lot of people coming and going, I think that would be a concern. But if you could adequately address that, then that would be huge.
I saw Commissioner Miranda. Commissioner Berube, were you complete? Commissioner Miranda, did you have some comments?
Yeah, sorry, I got confused forgetting the order of things for a sketch plan review versus a regular public review. I was waiting for the public review before I made any comments, and I realized there was none. So I do have a few comments actually, and related to what fellow commissioners have said. But first, let me address the question from the architect, and that is, as far as I'm concerned, FAR is fine and the density is fine, the height is fine. This is not, encroaching on anything. It's kind of, as others have said, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. Not in a negative way, but just, not near any residences. And so I think it's a very well-designed building. I mean, I know it's a sketch plan and subject to change, but certainly the second rendition is miles ahead of the first one, which was pretty forgettable. So, the height is fine. I like how it's set back on top. I think that makes a difference. I think that's something that Nick's been pushing for, once you go beyond 6 stories. I think that makes a lot of sense. It gives you height without it seeming imposing or being too, making the street feel too claustrophobic. So I like that a lot. My biggest thing is, and I think Commissioner Berube was, or maybe it was Olson, I can't remember now, talking about kind of its location. It is sort of the end of Grandview. And so on the one hand, I'm really impressed that you guys created this very urban feeling building, next to a golf course. I think that's really kind of amazing because, I mean, a lot of the buildings we see in Southdale, where you would think they'd be very dense and up along the street, we get very suburban looking buildings. So I think this building is really fantastic for the form that it has and where it is. But as Jane Jacobs said in Life and Death of Great American Cities, I mean, it is sort of this end zone. And so I wonder how much, pedestrian traffic you're really going to get here when there is literally a golf course across the street that has fenced all around except for the entrance to it. And you're literally across the street from City Hall parking lot, which as much as we now are trying to promote, fewer parking spaces and whatnot, we have a parking lot across the street from this. I think the biggest hope is that MnDOT land across the street that, if they ever redo it, although that's probably a decade away, if that gets redeveloped, that would add a lot more vitality to the area. But I really think this is going to be a car-focused building, certainly for the first 10 years, simply because, A, it's right next to a highway and 50th Street, and B, like I said, it's just zero density, east of it. I think, if anything, it would behoove the city to have a protected bike lane that would go from Grandview to 50th and France, because there's nothing interesting to walk past. As pretty as a golf course is, while you're on it, while you're walking along it, there's not much to see or do. So I think biking is the only way you're really going to have much activity here, not really so much walking. And then to another commissioner, I forget who said what now, talking about mixed use. I think this was Commissioner Berube. Being across from City Hall, I think, you're kind of missing an opportunity to have a coffee shop or a small cafe or something where people could escape, either for an informal meeting or to meet with people or something. I think that would be a nice small amenity to have there. I, don't doubt that you don't want a large retail presence there, but nowadays, but a little coffee shop or something would be nice. What else? I do like how it goes along the street. There was talk about the green space there, and as pretty as that green space might be, we have to remember that this is next to Highway 100, and anyone who's walked or biked across Eden Avenue across Highway 100 knows that's an extremely loud place to be, and a large building like this will only make it louder. So I honestly don't think that space would ever be used. It just, it would be just, it's space. It's just literally green space. It's not, it wouldn't really be activated or anything. So I'm not really concerned about keeping that. I prefer the building along the street, but if MnDOT owns the land, it's fine. And that's pretty much it. I mean, like I said, the design, I really like the design. And I also think the clear glass, whatever walkway between the buildings, that would also shield which I presume you know this, but would, shield your courtyard from the noise from Highway 100 while still getting the sun through. So that's kind of nice. but yeah, no, I think this is a very nice project. I like the scale of it, and I think it fits really well there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Miranda. Do any other commissioners have any comments? Commissioner Agnew, your screen for me seems to be frozen. Did you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, and I'm here. I can't see anyone else, so I tried restarting. Can you hear me all right?
Can hear you, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So yes, I do have some thoughts. I would rather hold off on building in that area where that intended frontage road is to go, even though I too really liked the mixed use plan. I would like to see ways that we can incorporate that mixed use approach within an area that would still enable that frontage road to be there. I know that some of that's still kind of unknown at this point from a timing perspective, but I think that that's really essential to the plan for this area. I heard Commissioner Berrubi's concerns about density and impacting traffic and safety, and I think that that's something that we always need to consider if we're thinking about mixed use. But I think that there are also some really appealing ways that we could, introduce like a co-working space or something like that, where I think a lot of people now are realizing that they don't want to drive 20, 30, 40 minutes to get to work. And while working from home right now is what everyone is doing, I think people are also seeing and feeling the need to get out and have their own dedicated workspace. And so I think that those types of areas where you can walk to a co-working space are going to become even more popular. So that might be a really interesting use here. I also really like how all of the parking is incorporated within the structure, at least the vast majority of it. And while I was considering, the parking and all of that, I think that really it was Commissioners Berrubi and Miranda who had comments about, this is not an easily accessible location. And when the entire plan of the area comes to fruition, it may be more so, but it is going to be a location that is primarily, if not solely, accessed via cars. And so typically I would want to see less parking. I do think that this plan, at least plan B, not plan A, is a bit overparked. But I'm also assuming that based on the structure, it makes sense to just do 2 full stories and you wouldn't want to just build a half story of parking. So if throughout the evolution of this, maybe one of those halves of the building becomes the retail or the office space, if it becomes more mixed use within that existing footprint, I would just continue to recommend try not to overpark if possible, but I do understand that the constraints of this area with the current situation does mean that it will be a car-focused location. But echoing everyone else's, I do like the style. I like the feel. I love that glass wall. I can just imagine driving up and seeing the sun coming through in, I guess, the morning. I don't know my directions, morning or evening, whenever the sun would be shining. I think that would be absolutely beautiful. So love seeing some of these elements for sure, and excited to see how it continues to evolve.
Thank you. Has anyone else had a chance to speak, I believe? I'll give some feedback if anyone has any after mine. Go right ahead. I think this is a very nice project. I strongly lean towards option B. I think option A too much for that location. I'll talk about that a little further. I'm not concerned about the height or the density with option B. When you think about height, you think about what the impact is on neighbors. I don't think there are any neighbors that are going to be very impacted by it. I like the bend in the project, actually. I think that we're always looking for ways to break long walls, and particularly if it's going to be a little bit closer to a road, I think a break like that, I think it'll make it a very nice, attractive building from the street, and I actually think it'll make it a little more interesting from the interior. I know if people live in apartment buildings or they have extremely long hallways, a little break is kind of a nice little mental change of pace. Let's see. You mentioned concrete for the structure. I'm not an expert on aesthetics. We always want to try to minimize concrete. Maybe we're saying the same thing, but concrete as an external, a surface is something we do try to minimize. We might be talking the same thing, just different ways, but we always try to we are encouraging buildings to have more natural type exteriors. So a minimal of concrete would be preferred. I think that I agree with Commissioner Miranda, by the way, about the green space. Generally, it's a wonderful thing, but in this case, probably be less of a value to the community. And I say that as someone who's walked and biked and ran up and down Wilson many times and cleaned trash on the green space that currently exists on Highway 100. And I mean, like if I'm walking on Wilson with my headphones on, I have to turn them off because to actually hear, and I don't have very good hearing, but to actually hear the music above the roar of the car, I have to turn up to too high a decibel level. So I suspect that me with my bad hearing, someone with normal hearing, the cars are probably even a bigger problem going on Highway 100. I do think that segues to my final comments, final two comments related. I do think the traffic study is going to be very critical for this, and I do think getting MnDOT, some agreement with MnDOT, because I really like the idea of getting that, of fixing the on and off ramps at there. I think now the off ramps aren't as big a problem, but it is kind of a undesirable design of an off ramp. But even more importantly, the on ramps, those two on ramps, the on ramps that we have right now, particularly, so there are really two on ramps right now. One, you have the one on the north end on the other side of 50th, and that one will stay, it sounds like. And then you have the on ramp near the property, near the old Grange building, and that one is a combination of two roads coming together. And in the afternoon, that can be a real bothersome on ramp. And so I think when the traffic study is done, I think we're going to have to look at the impact on the on ramps right now, because usually when we do traffic studies, we look at signal intersections, and I don't know if we look at highway on and off ramps, but I think that would be very critical, because I could easily see those getting backed up so far under either scenario. If we keep it how it is today, what will the additional cars be? But if we get rid of it and all the on-ramp cars, particularly in the evening rush hour, go to the north on-ramp, I'd be very interesting to see what will happen. Will cars be backed up all the way on to 50th? So I think that'll be a very important thing to see. I think when we do the traffic study, I think it's very important that it be very clear, very complete, very accurate, because I think that we're going to get a lot of neighborhood community pushback about traffic, as Commissioner Berube mentioned. That is, I'm fine with the 2.4 density in option B. I'm fine with the height. But as Commissioner Berube mentioned, where we usually get the feedback is, what's that going to do to traffic? And so I think that clarity on including the on-ramps, what that's going to be, will be very important when this goes to a public hearing. Finally, as just a small related point to the traffic, I'd like to see, I saw one drawing today that looked like the north of Eden, that the road is going to go very close to the old Grange building. And I'd like to see that we try not to infringe on the old Grange building. And I don't always love every historical designation that's brought up by city planning commissions, but that's one I think that's really important, that we try to maintain and survive for future generations. It's a really, in my experience, kind of a unique thing for an urban area. I mean, I've seen things like that if you go west of here, and there's something like that in Woodbury, where they have this old building, but there aren't a lot of, and Eden Prairie has kind of this old water pump area that's kind of cool, but there aren't a lot of them, and they aren't really notable. But that's one that I think that I want to make sure that we protect in the city of Edina. So whatever happens with the road, I want to make sure that it's not too close to the old Grange. Well, those are my comments. So at this point, what I'd like to do is offer the developer, if you have any further questions or comments you'd like to make, and anyone else on the Planning Commission, if you have any follow-up comments or questions. Otherwise, I want to thank everyone for the presentation and discussion. I see Commissioner Miranda. Lou, do you have something further?
Yeah, I realized after Commissioner Agnew and Chair Nemiroff spoke that I mentioned FAR and height, but I forgot to mention option A or option B. I too prefer option B for most of the reasons that others have said. And also, I was on the Transportation Commission when that came out, and so I voted for it. I do think working with MnDOT and getting that on and off ramp reconstructed would be a good thing for the area. And I think if anything, long term, it would help your project in the sense that there would be buildable land across the street. So I think it would benefit you in the long run anyway. So, but if MnDOT doesn't want to go down that path, then actually I don't really have a problem with the office space. Thanks.
Any other commissioners or the applicant, anything further you want to ask or say?
I'll wrap up last,
Mr. Walton,
if it's okay, as the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Walton.
Before I go, any other commissioners? I didn't want to interrupt. So I'd like to thank you all again for first, what's going to be a lot of conversations about the project. I feel like we got some really good, helpful comments. And you lost me by video for a little bit, but I could hear you the whole time, and now luckily I'm back in again. So we were able to capture all that. Carrie, regarding the traffic, I had already heard from one of the neighborhood residents about a couple comments and questions about traffic, and then these, obviously it's come up tonight, is we can work offline on scope, just to make sure that if we're going to do this, we capture all the scope that everybody's looking for.
Yep.
Okay. Chris, do you have any other comments or questions before we wrap up? We've used a lot of everyone's time tonight. I want to be sensitive to that.
No, I don't at this point. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, that will take us to our second sketch plan review tonight. This one's a little different. This is on 4040 West 70th Street. It's an affordable housing complex. And I believe Community Development Director Teague will be presenting for the city again.
I will. Thank you, Chair, members of the commission again. So this site is located in the Southdale district. It's on the west side of France on 70th and Valley View, so straight west of the Galleria. The property is currently zoned planned commercial district 3, so it has the same zoning as Galleria, Southdale, so anticipated as a more intense commercial type use. There's an existing office building on the site today. The height overlay district maximum for the site is 4 stories, 48 feet. Site's guided in our comprehensive plan for office residential uses with a maximum density of 75 units an acre, which is what the proposal is this evening. It is located within what we've labeled in the comprehensive plan, this hatched area, as a transition zone from the single family neighborhoods to the west, transitioning into the greater density within France and York. So what the applicant is proposing here is to tear down that existing office building and build a 3 to 4 story senior affordable project. There would be 118 units, mainly underground parking, but there would be some surface parking stalls. So the density here would be 75 units an acre. So this initial rendering, we did receive some feedback. I believe some of the commissioners received it. Concern about pedestrians along the sidewalk based on these renderings that have been posted on the website. The sidewalks won't be right along the street as the renderings show. Really the intent here is to show the buildings. we'll see their site plans. They do show boulevard-style sidewalks. Some of these sidewalks have been constructed with the roundabout that exists, the recently built roundabout there on 70th. So I just wanted to highlight that as we have received that feedback. As I mentioned, the 3 to 4 stories is consistent with the design experience guidelines and the zoning for this site, where we're stepping back 3 stories along Valley View and then greater height as the project steps back. So I'll look at some of the renderings, and the applicant will go through that in more detail. So again, this is Valley View. That sidewalk would be step back boulevard style with grass that would separate the sidewalk. So here's a look at the site plan. So you can see the sidewalk here would have green space between the road. So you can see the existing sidewalk that's been constructed as part of the roundabout that continues along 70th. So being that this project is located within the Greater Southdale District, we did have Mick Johnson review and comment on the project, and he had suggested the potential to flip the building. And there's some pros and cons in regard to that. The applicant is proposing this J shape. It's kind of a hybrid. Part of the building is pulled up to the street, but there is the parking and drop-off and access to the underground parking off Valley View. So some of they believe that it works better for emergency vehicles, safety, accessing off of Valley View as opposed to 70th. And the applicant will go through some more of their reasons as well. In terms of comparing the parking standards, so some flexibility would be requested on setbacks. They would meet the setback on Valley View. 70th Street, I'm not entirely clear. I think it's somewhere in the 25 to 30 foot setback to the curb, and to the north 10 feet and east 10 feet as well. The height does conform to the zoning. Floor area ratio is just slightly above what would be allowed in a commercial district. But again, this is all senior housing and affordable, so the traffic generated from that shouldn't be too significant. Again, we would do a traffic study as part of any formal application. And parking would comply. This is in a mixed-use commercial district, so our parking standards are a little bit lower. We just require 1 space per unit, which is what they're proposing here. The code says that the city can require additional spaces if needed. They believe, though, that the 120 spaces they're proposing would be adequate. And again, that would be reviewed as part of a parking study. So there would be a rezoning requested here from the PCD3 district to PUD. Again, that would allow some of that flexibility. And most importantly, it would ensure that long-term affordability element of the project. So some of the discussion points in regard to the height, up to the street, really the building to the street, traffic and parking, again, those studies would be required as part of any formal application. And then the affordable housing, of course, this would be 100% affordable, so an entirely affordable project would help us achieve some of our affordable housing goals with the Metropolitan Council. So this is a property that is owned by the Edina Housing Foundation, recently purchased. And similar to our project on Amundsen, you may recall a couple of years ago, the affordable housing project that's under construction there. The foundation solicited, went out for requests for proposals and did interviews and did select the team that is the Ecumen team that's proposing this evening, led by Steve Min. And so they are going through the sketch plan and hopefully any following formal applications that would follow. So I'll stop there, answer any questions. Steve Min is on the call, and along with his architect and development team for a formal presentation. But I will stop there and answer any questions you might have in advance.
Thank you, Kerry. Planning commissioners, do you have any questions for staff?
I have a question.
Okay, Commissioner Strauss.
Yes, Carrie. The view I'm looking at my own. It's the site of existing conditions, and on my view, it's the lot is shaded in orange. Yes, that's the one. So that area to north of the existing building, how is that currently being used? Is that developed, or is that parking, or?
Yeah,
or
it's
vacant
parking
site?
it's parking for the use to the north.
Parking for the current building?
Yes.
Okay.
So is that a shared? Yeah, it might be a shared kind of arrangement. It looks like access back and forth. Or are you saying within the orange here, this parking field?
Within the orange. I mean, it looks undeveloped.
Okay.
Is
Yes.
that-
Yeah, that's parking for the existing structure. I thought you were referring to the parking
Okay.
to the north of the orange site.
Okay. So there was half the site was parking, right?
Correct.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Strauss. Any other commissioners have questions for staff?
I'll also mention that Stephanie Hawkinson, our affordable housing manager, is on the call. Should you have any questions for her?
Oh, that's great. Well, yes, welcome, Stephanie. So I had a question for Planner Teague. If we followed Mick Johnson's recommendation and flipped the building, would the parking lot be then adjacent to Kinderberry, or would it then be adjacent to Kinderberry, and would the entrance then be on 70th instead of Valley View?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, thanks. That's all I had. Anyone else with questions for staff, or we can bring up Mr. Min and the development team?
Okay.
Mr. Why don't we do that?
Greetings. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Steve Min. I'm with Loopy Development. This evening, given the lateness of the hour, we'll try to keep our presentation efficient so you can get to some questions with us. With me this evening on my team and my partners, Ann Stanfield is with the Ecumen organization. She's here this evening. Zach Rosnow from Pope Architects and Will Matzik from Kimley Horn Engineering are part of our presentation team this evening. Just briefly, Carrie's mentioned that we were the successful team that won the RFP from the Edina Housing Foundation. Ecumen is a 150-year-old organization with a significant presence, almost 15,000 customers in the state of Minnesota, serving the senior community. That's my partner that Ann represents. Loopy Development is a local boutique development firm. My bride, Lucy, and I are Edina residents. We do a lot of affordable housing in the metropolitan area, but we're a fairly small shop, and we focus on community and transportation-oriented projects primarily in the city and in the metropolitan region. We pursued this site with some enthusiasm because we thought the RFQ was particularly interesting and presented a number of interesting challenges. Permanent affordability, which we can get into if you'd like to get into more detail later on, but also high quality and an amenity-rich presentation in the package of housing that serve a variety of price points. So this project will be serving both 30% AMI, 50% AMI, 60% AMI to some extent, and maybe even as much as 80% AMI. That's a unique opportunity in Edina that wouldn't be available in a lot of other metropolitan communities. We want to talk a little bit about the design, so I won't get into too many of the weeds about the component of the project management, and we'll talk about that later in the presentation. But I'd like to roll to Zach Rouse now to go through the design with you, and then we'll get some feedback. So thank you for entertaining our proposal this evening.
Yes, thanks, Steve. Mr. Chair and Planning Commission members, we're excited to be here, like Steve said, in front of you this evening. My name is Zach Rosnow. I'm with Pope Architects. I'm a senior project designer. We've worked Hope has worked closely with the city for a number of years, and we're excited to bring another one in front of you today. I don't know. I can try to share my screen here. It's the same slides that Carrie has, but I'll just go through them in a little bit more detail. I think you guys can see that. So, you know where the site is. Carrie did a great job of explaining kind of where we were at with that. Our idea for the project and the layout and the orientation of it and everything really stems from the site being a transition zone. We have the Cornelia neighborhood on the west, single family to the south. We've got this. We've got a lot of traffic on the corner. We wanted to make sure that the entrances into both the underground parking and the surface parking were on the street that had less traffic on them, and we could get it away from France Avenue as much as possible. And just, it seemed like it would be safer for everybody that would be traveling in the area and for the residents as well. We created a drop-off in front here that would be nice for guests, Uber, ride-sharing, Lyft, that kind of thing. And that's centralized there. Generally, this project is about 145,000 square feet. If we take out garages, mechanical rooms, restrooms, that kind of thing, we're at about 106,000. Our unit mix is roughly 80% one bedrooms, 20% two bedrooms. And as Carrie mentioned, we have roughly 1-to-1 parking between the underground and the surface. If we go to the massing of the building, it is a 3 and a 4 story. There are 3 and 4 story portions to it. There's also a 2-story portion that is, I guess, right here. That's closest to the neighborhood. Again, this being a transition zone, we wanted to make sure that our stepping and our massing transitioned away from the neighborhood, lower density into the higher density, higher heights, that kind of idea. So to go back to the elevations here, we're roughly 42 feet at the height, about 32 at the 3-story, 22 somewhere in their low 20s for the 2-story. We wanted to maintain the high quality materials of the area, so we looked at the intersections of 70th and France and across France, and picked up some of what has already been developed and what's already part of the character of the region. So we're about 25% masonry, roughly 40% would be metal paneling. That's the dark that you see here, that's infilled in between the masonry. And then the rest would be a fiber cement, maybe a lap or a panel, something of that nature. One unique element here is on this east elevation that would face France. That metal could be sort of a feature, something that you could see from France. That would be kind of an art of its own. Very quickly, in this area here, we had talked about creating an art gallery. I think art is an important thing to bring to the site, bring to the community. And so we had talked about having a 2-story art gallery here, and some accompanying art that would be out on the site that would face the roundabout. You can see that a little bit more clearly in some of these renderings, where the 2-story portion would be here. We'd like to get that to have a lot of glass in it to really activate the site from the roundabout. A few kind of more technical things, I guess. Again, this is in a transition zone, so we're in street typology 1. So we're very conscious of the scale, the stepping, the massing, solar orientation. You know, we made a point as you know, this is the south portion of the site, to have the building be lower so that we could get sunlight up and over. You know, daylighting is something that we wanted to try to get into as many spaces as possible. So we incorporated larger windows as well. You can see it a little bit here, but we have solar up on top of the east section of the building. Of course, that would face south. Another guideline that we wanted to make sure that was noted was placemaking. You know, having an art gallery and an art. Another rendering we showed some art on the corner here. We wanted to make a place that was, you know, contemporary and also uniquely Edina, and it had its place and it fit into the fabric of Edina. In terms of you know, one of the guidelines that we also looked at was a spectrum of living opportunities. Of course, it's 100% affordable, age restricted, so it's a senior focused design. We needed something that was welcoming, felt inviting, and created a little bit of a micro community within the greater community fabric of Edina. I'll let Will speak a little bit more to this here, and I'll hand it over to him. But we also looked at, you know, how do we create a heightened landscaping zone? We're very conscious of the amount of rainwater and stormwater that's in this area. We brought these rain gardens to the front of the building. You know, we see them as sort of an educational opportunity as they fill and they dry out, and these plants are growing in through there, that the residents will see how this this living ecosystem works. And maybe Will, I can throw it over to you. You can speak a little bit more to that.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. Maybe it would be helpful to go to your third slide there for the overall site plan. I can kind of speak to things from a site civil engineering perspective. As Zach indicated, as we were looking at the overall site, one of the components we wanted to be sensitive towards was stormwater management. As indicated earlier, this site in the existing condition today is basically all pavement out there on the north half of the property, and there are no stormwater management. Is no stormwater management on the site today. So as we look to redevelop, we want to do that certainly responsibly and improve stormwater in the area. We do know that is a bit of a concern, and in particular with this layout, it lends itself really well to managing stormwater in the northwest corner of the site. It's about 6 feet lower in that area than the rest of the site. The site generally flows in that direction, and so with this configuration, we have an opportunity to have two different stormwater management techniques that allow us to treat the water in the parking lot here on the west side adjacent to Valley View in an underground system, and then also have a tandem system with rainwater gardens with nice landscaping in the rainwater gardens that will treat the water both from a quality and quantity and rate standpoint. So it lends itself very well to improving that situation. And then as Zach had mentioned earlier too, just from our site access standpoint as well, that we feel like having our entrances off of Valley View will be
a little bit of a safer condition as opposed to having it out on 70th Street where there's a higher traffic situation and more decisions need to be made as some of our residents and guests are coming in and out of the site. So we feel like the configuration we have here lends itself well to the traffic in the area. So those were kind of a couple of the higher points I wanted to touch on here. So thanks, Zach.
Yep. And maybe, Anne, you can talk to some of the programmatic elements of it.
Sure. Thank you. I'm Ann Stanfield. I am Director of Development at Ecumen, and we are thrilled to be working on this project and for the opportunity to build affordable housing for the senior population in Edina. The site is in a great, vibrant location in the community. It's walkable to a lot of amenities, which is very appealing for our target audience. We are looking at an age-restricted building to serve folks that are 55 plus, and it is an independent living building. So while many of Ecumen's properties offer healthcare services, this building will not have healthcare services at it and is really targeting folks who want to leave their single-family homes perhaps and move into a community with peers and to no longer have to maintain the living in a single-family home. So with the vibrancy of the location, we're also really excited to bring the same vibrancy to our programming of the building and of the community. Zach mentioned arts programming. We envision a space that could be used for visual arts and other types of arts programming, both for residents of the building, but the larger community as well. We have ample program space. If you go maybe to slide 4, ample programming space that we would have on the main level that would have community area within the building where folks could gather with family or with others in the community. We also have planned, which you can see a bit in the site plan, as well, community garden space on the main level, which is another great amenity for the residents. We anticipate having gathering spaces for folks to eat outside, gather outside, but also have raised planter beds to garden. And I think Zach and Will spoke a bit to the rain gardens as well. So really providing the opportunity to create a natural environment, and folks that will be giving up maybe having a garden and a yard will have a lot of natural amenities on the site. In terms of programming as well, as we talk about vibrancy and community and creating a community within the site, we have had discussions with several local organizations, including Minnesota State University Mankato, who Ecumen has a partnership with through our Mankato community and their Mankato location, but I know they have a presence in Edina. So we have plans to partner with them on bringing programming in and developing programming for our residents to participate in their Edina campus. It could be within the arts, fitness, education, volunteerism. So we've talked about a variety of exciting opportunities, and I think that speaks to our approach of really wanting to localize not only the design of the project, but also the programming for the residents, and have it be relevant to what the residents in that community, what's important to them, but also to create those strong connections, which promotes health, vitality, and longevity. So in addition to Minnesota State University Mankato, we've had conversations with the Edina Chamber of Commerce, the Green Umbrella, and Ecumen also has relationships with organizations such as Lutheran Services that we plan to create enriched programming in the building. So while it is for independent living and we do not have services necessarily, we envision rich programming being offered, which is sort of above and beyond what a typical affordable housing project might do. We have had an opportunity to meet with neighbors via a Zoom meeting, which we hosted on November 30th of last year. We were excited to share this same proposal that you're seeing tonight with neighbors in the Cornelia neighborhood and in the surrounding community to get feedback from them. The commentary that we had and questions were around lighting and light pollution or the risk of that, which I think, you know, certainly in terms of compliance with the code, we don't anticipate that being an issue. Questions about building materials, which, you know, just the mix of building materials. And I think we are sensitive to creating something that has a strong component of natural building materials. I think Zach spoke a bit to that as well. And being smart about the placement of where those natural materials are within the building to maximize their visual presence. There was a comment about stormwater management, which I think will address how we are planning to tackle that. Questions about design experience guidelines, which I think, again, you know, Zach talked a bit about as it relates to the gradual transitions in height of the building, the landscape elements, the connections to the community. So we were excited. You know, there was a lot of interest in the project, and we're glad to get neighbor feedback before coming before you tonight. I think we also do have a website for the project, which has solicited additional feedback. We haven't gotten much response yet, but we do hope to continue to use that venue to continue dialogue with neighbors and others that may be interested in the project or to share their thoughts. So with that, we would be excited to hear your thoughts on the project and answer any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. This is Ian of the Planning Commission, Ian Nimrod. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments for the applicant?
And I have a quick one, which
okay,
maybe
Commissioner Strauss.
Yes, thank you. Perhaps Ecumen, the representative there, could help. The residents would be entirely 55 or older. Is that? I mean, is it all units would be?
Yeah.
That would be the target.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the child care center next door is going to be a particular asset, but it's not. Really
No, they won't. But we also, I mean, it's great for us to be located next to a child care center. I know we talk a lot about intentional intergenerational programming in a lot of the projects we plan and in projects we've worked on with Lupe and the Lupe development team in other locations, and it's you know, a compelling way to keep various generations engaged and to learn and grow from that interaction.
Great, that's a very good point. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other commissioners?
I do.
Commissioner Miranda.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy about the affordability, of course. That's a nice part of it. And the art and the programs that will be there. I like the rain gardens and the stormwater management. I have to say I agree with Mick Johnson about the flipping the building. I wonder if there's some way, that you could make it, say, 3 stories on the west side and 4 stories further east or something as you move away from the neighborhoods. But it just seems, and I mentioned this at the last project that we reviewed just before this one, where they have really in a much more rural area. Right next to a highway and a golf course. They have this amazing 7-story building, and it's right up along the street. And here we have, and this is the problem we have with a lot of proposals in the Southdale area, is that it's sort of like architects think, oh, you're in the suburbs, you want a suburban building, and that's not really what we want. And I think this really feels too suburban, and it doesn't really go with what we're trying to do in the area. And so I think really having the building along the street is really very important. I think it's a big issue for me. And I would like to see you guys try to address that. If you're trying to balance that with the housing across the street, is there a compromise we can come to where, the building's a little lower on this side of the street or something? We approved a building a couple of years ago that just finished at 44th and France, which is an apartment building, and it's 4 stories, and it does taper down towards the housing next to it, but because of the lay of the land, but it's 3 to 4 stories, and it's adjacent to housing. It's not across the street from it. So I think we can do something here that would make everybody happy. And the height is fine. Obviously, it meets the city zoning, so that's fine. And I think it's very appropriate there. Let's see here. In terms of turning in and out, 70th Street certainly is a busy street, but the city has put in traffic circles all along 70th Street near here. So I don't think there's any real concern about cars going very fast or making it difficult to turn onto 70th Street as an entrance. So I don't think that's really a concern. It's also a 30-mile-per-hour street, if I remember correctly. So I don't see that really as being a major issue in terms of reorienting the building. But generally, I really like it. I think it's the idea behind it is great, and I think the initial renditions look good. I just think the form of it, I think, needs to change. Thank you.
Miranda. Other commissioners? Olson, Berube, Agnew. Do you have any questions or comments?
This is Joanne.
Hi, Joanne.
And hi. And I usually always support what Mick says or agree with what he says. And I'm really thinking I like the way that it's facing, with the access from Valley View. And, just looking at what's behind the building, and again, I know we just turned off the site plan. If we could maybe pull that back up. I know everyone wants to look at one, but that's okay. But I just, I understand what Mick is saying, that you have all the resident, a lot of those, the units facing kind of that back parking lot. But I don't know. For some reason, I kind of like the breaking up the wall along Valley View. I think if we flip it, you'd have that long, extensive wall along Valley View, and I'm just not sure how well that would work. And but but I like everything else you're proposing, the height, and I think it's really an exciting project, and love seeing it as all affordable, and everything that you can do for the educational component with the rain gardens, and love hearing what you're going to have with the activities for the outdoors and indoors. But yeah, typically I would this isn't France, this is Valley View, and I don't know, it's hard for me to picture flipping it and having it work, but I'm open to hear what other planning commissioners say. Thank you.
Commissioner Berube, Commissioner Agnew, do either of you wish to share any comments?
I applaud the building and I applaud the initiative. I think the affordable housing and 55 plus makes a ton of sense. I think it's a good looking building. And the education piece, the partnership with Mankato State. I think this will be a great asset to Edina. I'm thinking about the flipping of the building, and I see pros and cons. So I don't know that I have much to add. I think overall it's a good looking building. I guess one of the advantages of flipping it, of course, is you wouldn't have not only the aesthetics of it, but you wouldn't have the residents walking near the cars so much, which might be an issue if it's elderly people who may, not all, but some may be less mobile. But overall, I think I applaud the project.
Commissioner Agnew, would you like to share anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I, like everyone else, love that this is happening. I know that it's definitely lacking. Have had this completed a couple of years ago, maybe. But overall, I'm really excited about it. I like some of the attributes. I think solar was mentioned. I love the rain gardens, like making sure that it's fitting in with the community in that sense, and is also environmentally focused, I think is really key. I would just implore you to bring in, the highest quality materials that you are able to, given the location, the proximity to the residential area. I think that that's going to be really important. I would also like to see evidence for the need for that much parking. I think with this population, in order to really drive for that affordability, and especially if I'm asking for high quality materials, one of the other trade-offs is being able to reduce parking, knowing that, with underground parking, those might be cost anywhere $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a stall, and so I think that adds up really quickly. And knowing specifically that this population, given the proximity to Southdale, may not need as much parking as that. So I would just, when the proposal is shaping up, to see a little bit of research done on how much parking is really needed. I think you got enough feedback from others on the orientation of the building, so I won't comment on that. But overall, it's great to see an affordable housing project like this. So thank you.
Kate. So I'm the only commissioner who hasn't spoken. So I'm going to mostly echo what Commissioner Olson said. I like the project very much. Commissioner Berube also liked the project, several people also. But I like the project very much. I like the location. I'm a big fan of Mick Johnson also. However, I prefer the building laid out this way for all the reasons that Commissioner Olson said. In fact, I probably prefer it because the entrance is on Valley View instead of on 70th. But I thought this was a great presentation, a nice project, and I appreciate what you're doing. So, the applicant have any further comments or questions? Or do any other commissioners have any further comments or questions?
I'll wait, Mr. Chairman, if there are other commission questions, but I did want to make a comment or two about the orientation, if I could.
That sounds good. And Carrie, could we stop sharing the screen? Thank you. Well, Mr. Min, please go ahead.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you. So, Commissioner, I want you to appreciate that we do not make the orientation recommendation that we're making lightly. We look through the guidelines and we understand the pros and cons. We actually did a sketch that we call the C shape because it faces east in a C-shaped building. Zach, maybe you could put that up. And we did a pros and cons analysis when we presented to the Housing Foundation and to the neighborhood. And I think we only talked briefly about some of the risks, but when you face east with a C shape, not only do we have an entrance on 70th that could be potentially problematic, but we lose parking, we lose access, we lose the ability for emergency vehicles and drop-off to function in a circular fashion that gets out without interfering with pedestrian traffic in the common public spaces. So when we looked at it and saw how tight it was up against the Canterbury Hill site, we made those informed decisions thinking that the hybrid that we had come up with at least some hard edges on Valley View was better than having a constrained internal courtyard that didn't really provide a lot of connection or access. So we wanted you to have at least that information as you think about what we were doing. I got sort of a sense of split here. Some people feel strongly one way or the other. And we didn't want you to think that we were doing it absentmindedly. We've provided Mr. Teague the pros and cons. I don't know if that's available, but I don't know, Zach, if you have it, or Carrie, if you have it. But we would like you to at least give us some additional feedback on it, because we've intentionally not taken these drawings beyond this schematic orientation because we really wanted your feedback. And it's important to us that we get this right the first time and do this correctly. So I just want to make sure you had that. Oh, thank you. Somebody found the advantages. Wonderful. Technology is not my strong suit this week. But this is the list of the J versus the C that we felt there were just too many cons in the C to outview the pros in the J. We really felt the loss of the access in particular and the hidden front door were losses to the way we designed the building. And visitor loading in particular was important. And then I think, I don't want to skip over it too much, Will Matzik from Kimley Horn pointed out we would have a much better stormwater management system with the J shape. And that's important to us. So I just wanted to put that into the record and hear additional feedback if we could. We appreciate all that you've provided, and a lot of it reinforces some of the things we've heard with the neighbors.
Would any commissioners like to respond?
Yeah, I would.
Okay, Commissioner Miranda.
Yeah, so I mean, is there, I would think, part of what the Southdale guidelines say, I think what Mick, I think, would say is that rather than having a hidden front door, that the front door could possibly be both inward facing for anyone who drives there and outward facing also, a hallway sort of thing, so that, residents could just walk to the street. That'd be much more inviting than if it were a solid wall of just residences. I definitely think we would want, switching the building around and then having a solid wall, like basically looking like a big box store or something. I don't think would be matching the guidelines. I think we want something that would have a major, clear front door that would be on the street.
Thank you, Lou. Any other commissioners have comments? Or Lou, if you have more also? Anyone else? I just have two quick things. One is another reason that I prefer the existing layout as opposed to flipping the building is just a sense that I've developed recently of not having parking lots next to each other. And if you flip the building, it appeared that the parking lot for this building would be immediately next to the Kinderberry one. So that's not a big reason either way. That's my first comment. My second comment is I liked what you just presented. And if and when you come back, I hope that you'll include these materials as part of your communication to show what you considered and show the back and forth, regardless of which way you go. If you decide to stay how you are today, but still bring this back and maybe spend another minute going through the pros and cons that you analyze, I think that would be helpful for everyone at the next meeting. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the applicant? Thank you. Thank you all for a nice discussion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. Good evening.
You have a good evening. Well, that takes us to the next item on our agenda, and that's correspondence and petitions. And so I ask are there any that we should discuss?
Nothing this evening, nope.
So I had one that I actually wanted to discuss. So we received some correspondence about this previous matter, actually, and we get a lot of correspondence. And I just noticed one thing in this correspondence that struck me. I'm going to get on a soapbox for just a second, which was I thought that we received the correspondence recently that was kind of personally attacking of an individual. And we get a lot of correspondence where people present additional facts or they present their opinions pro or con on a project, but we received a piece of correspondence that I thought was kind of like, well, this person, it was just kind of like personal attacks, like accusing someone of not being competent, accusing someone of not acting in good faith and without backup. I mean, there are people in this world that are not acting in good faith and are not acting, that are not competent. And, you know, if you have evidence of it, that's important. But I think I would ask that at this time, with all the tension that there exists, that if there's anything we can do to kind of just dial down these unsupported attacks on someone's competence or ethics, I think, you know, we're just the Edina Planning Commission. I don't know what we can do, but if there's something we can do, I personally found that letter to be almost disqualifying. And so I just wanted to say that there was someone I've seen comments from before that I thought were very intelligent, very insightful, but I'd like to ask that if anything we can do to just tone down the unsupported personal stuff, I think that would be a little bit we can do to make the world a better place. So that was my little soapbox. Thank you for your patience with me. That takes us to chair and member comments. I guess the chair just gave a comment. Do any members have any comments? That takes us to staff comments. Do any members of staff have comments?
I do. Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of updates on projects that the Planning Commission reviewed. First, the 70th and France project that did go before the City Council in December, and they did approve the project on a preliminary basis. So it was a preliminary rezoning approval. The Southdale Office Center site, the council held the public hearing at their last meeting, and they will take action on it next Wednesday. So those are the two big ones that are going through the process now. And also wanted to mention, you know, we've talked about Planning Commission training, and that potentially we were going to do a joint session with the City Council. We have scheduled that. It is going to be March 24th, which is the same evening as your regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting. So we're going to just take that time frame, not have a Planning Commission that night, and rather just focus on a training session. So it would be with the City Council. It's going to be put on by John Shardlow of Stantec. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but he is he's outstanding. So he's been a long-time planning consultant, and he's given these types of training sessions for a number of years now, both through, I believe, ULI and through Stantec. So we're going to set up the, you know, what that's going to, so it's going to be, we're going to talk about land use law, variances, rezoning, comprehensive plan, those kind of things. Talk about public hearing requirements, and then role of the Planning Commission. I'm thinking it's going to go well. He's very good, and potentially we could even have him back just for the Planning Commission if there's something that we want to focus on. But just wanted to. It's a meeting date that you already have on your calendars, so it will be virtual. At least that's what we're thinking for now. It is a couple of months away, but well, that is in the process. And that is all I have this evening.
Well, that's excellent. That's excellent. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments in response to that?
I don't have anything in response to what Carrie just said, but good to ask a question. Do you know what the status is for replacing, our missing planning commissioners, or the ones who have
Yes. Yeah, I believe the city is now actively taking applications. I believe the deadline is the end of this month, and the council will be doing interviews shortly thereafter. And we should have that person or the two people assigned to us probably in early March. So the intent was to have those new commissioners on board. That's why the training is out so far, because we did want to have those new members seated.